welcome to my channel. It's Hal Bird here to talk to you about real estate. And if you clicked on this video, it's because you know that I passed my real estate exam on my first try. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. If you are in a good mood or having a good day or want good vibes to come your way, make sure you like this video, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can keep getting great content just like this. Also, if you want to book a time with me to pick my brain, you will find the link in the description to do that as well. I passed my real estate exam 2 weeks ago today, and I'm going to talk about everything that I did from the day that I purchased the course up until taking the exam and kind of what the experience was like after the fact. So we're gonna have to go back a little bit. I wanna tell you what led to the decision of me taking the real estate exam. So the quick and dirty version of the story is my husband has been in real estate for 20 years as an investor, and I've helped him in the investments for our real estate business. And last November, so we're going back about 10 months ago, we went on an appointment to buy a house, and really nice guy. The deal just didn't work out. And the situation was he was being forced by the court to sell the house in his divorce process, and he was supposed to split the proceeds with his wife, and he had a deadline to do it. They gave him a lot of time, but he waited until the deadline, and he needed to sell this house by a certain time. And we had built up a great rapport with this gentleman. He was really nice, liked us, but when we left the house deciding not to buy it as an investment, our opportunity to cash in or make any money on that house was gone. And months later, I checked in on the house to see if it had sold or if he had gotten an extension from the court, and it turned out that a real estate agent had listed and sold the house. And it made us realize that if one of us, me, had their real estate license, we could have taken that listing, that rapport, that relationship we had built, that appointment, and turned it into a financial win and a win for this gentleman, this guy as well. But because we weren't licensed, we didn't have that opportunity. So that was kind of the spark that reignited my interest in getting into real estate. So let's jump into the exam. Some of the questions I've seen people ask are, what practice exam should I take? What study materials did you use? Did you buy bonuses or books or flashcards? Like, tell me what you did to pass. The short answer is, I didn't use anything extra other than what was provided to me in the course that I selected. I went through Real Estate Express. I bought their exam prep package, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So I want you to pay attention because I looked up what the pass rates are, specifically on the first try for multiple states, and it ranges anywhere from 47% to 75%. So I didn't see any states where more than 75% of people are passing on their first try. And considering, at least in my state, which is Washington, that you have to pay every time you take the test, I wanted to make sure that I passed on the first time, because why spend extra money when you don't have to? It felt like a waste to me. So let's talk about the class that you're gonna select. And the first thing you wanna think about is, do I wanna go in person or do I wanna go online? You wanna take into account your learning style. Are you a visual learner? Are you better learning via audio? Is reading what does it for you? Think about your learning style when you're deciding if you're gonna go to an in-person class or online. I took my first real estate class at a community college. It was a semester-long course, and I really wouldn't recommend going that way, because if you took all classes back to back, it would take you 1.5 years to go through the classes, and that's way longer than it needs to take. And if you do any basic Google search, you'll see that you can get your license in as little as 2 weeks if you go with an online program. So that's what I did. I bought my course December 21st, 23rd, something like that, towards the end of December. 2019. And my thought was, I'll take 6 weeks, I'll go through it. You know, I'm not going to sit in front of the computer for 8 hours every day or whatever the max is that they allow you to do. I'm not going to do that for 2 weeks. I have other businesses to run. I have a life outside of getting my real estate license. So I thought, 6 weeks, that's plenty of time. I'll breeze through it. I'll study a couple hours every day. It'll be fine. And that wasn't the case. To be completely honest with you, I was a really good student my whole life, and in college, graduated with honors, and the information was way more dense than I thought it was going to be, and it took me a lot longer to go through it than I thought. Plus, I was a little bit lazy. I didn't have a great study schedule. I didn't block off time in my calendar every day, which I would highly recommend that you do if you want to go through the course a lot faster than I did. So from December, we'll call it what is it in a month when it's like not mid, it's not right at the 15th, but it's obviously not the end of the month. Like, what is that period between mid and the end? Or that period between the beginning and the middle? Totally unrelated. I'm going to say it's mid. So from mid-December until I finished my classes, which was towards the end of June. If you take that long, you will forget some of the information if you don't study right in the beginning. I wouldn't recommend taking as long as I did to go through the classes, which was about 6 months. I would probably say a really reasonable rate is to do 1 hour during the week, like 1 hour a night, maybe 2 to 3 hours on the weekends. And I would make sure that you schedule that time in your phone's calendar and set reminders to make sure it goes off and that you stick to it and you adhere to it, because the better habits that you develop early on, you'll be able to bring over into your real estate career. I told you guys that I went online. I went with Real Estate Express. I did their exam prep package. At the time of this recording, it's a $248 package. I signed up through an agent that I knew, through their affiliate link. I got a discount. I ended up paying $148.80, so about $150. And that's another reason why I went with online versus in class versus in person, because it was so much cheaper and I could do it on my schedule. Some of the other reasons that I chose Real Estate Express was because they had a money back guarantee. They call it their pass or don't pay guarantee. And I figured since the fee to sit for the test in my state was $138, if I didn't pass and I could get my money back for the course, it would be a wash. So for me, that presented a really low risk investment in myself. That package also includes some additional exam prep and practice quizzes that are truthfully what the main thing that I used to study as I was going into the test. So going back to being I didn't have the best approach when I went into the course. So not only did I not block off time on my calendar, but I also changed my study practices multiple times throughout the course. And I think if I had started studying the way that I ended studying, I would have gone through it faster and I probably would retain the material better. So when I started, I was taking written notes, and writing does help you remember things better. So because I took 6 months, by the time it was over, I didn't have to study the early concepts as closely because I did remember a lot of the information from the beginning because I was writing the notes. But I was writing such thorough notes that it was taking me a lot longer to finish than was necessary. Also, truth be told, I didn't read the book. I went through Real Estate Express's screens. They have all the information summarized, and you go through and it's one page, you read the screen, you go to the next one, you go to the next one, and it shows you your percentage that you're through, which is nice because it also makes it very easy to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do this lesson today, or I'm going to do this section. I personally like to stop when I got to a quiz. So my goal towards the end, what I was doing was going through a lesson, and I would know that I was good for the day. I would say I'm going to do one quiz today. So I would go through that lesson, take the quiz. If I understood the quiz or passed the quiz on the first try, I would consider that a win. Sometimes I would do 2 quizzes a day. I would recommend following that approach because, like I said, in the beginning, I was taking such thorough notes. I wasn't focused on getting to those bookmarks and looking at it almost as chapters that I could, at the end of a day of studying, say, okay, this is the progress that I made, and this is very clear what I did for the day, i.e. passed a quiz. But that's how I shifted towards the end. So I went from handwriting out all my notes. So you can see here, these are the first notes that I took ever in the course, Washington Fundamentals, Chapter 1, Washington License Law. And I have pages and pages of notes, but it took me way too long. So I didn't even get through this whole course. I got to Unit 7 before I completely changed the way that I was studying. And I went from handwritten notes to electronic notes in Google Drive. And that sped things up a lot because I could copy and paste the relevant information out of the course and copy it into the document. So I wasn't copying everything word for word, but I would copy key sections that I knew I needed to remember. And for me personally, that still wasn't the best way that I could study. And so towards the end of the course, what I ended up doing that I think made the most difference, and if you only take one thing from this video, this is how I would study. Super simple. We like to keep it simple, right? What you're gonna do is when you start your course, you're gonna start a Google Doc. You're gonna title it something like Things I Need to Study Up On. I'm pretty sure that's my title verbatim. And every time I came to a section in the course, a concept, a definition, that really wasn't clicking for me, that I couldn't recall easily, or I got a question about this topic wrong on one of the quizzes, I would open up that document, I would write that down as a bullet point. And then when it came time to study for the exam, because I'd finished the course and I had to wait in between my course finishing and actually sitting for the test, and that's another story for another day. But once you schedule your exam and you're going to be studying up for it, you can reference this document for items that you need to focus on. So that's my biggest study tip. Open that document. I think by the end of it, I might have had like 15 or 20 things on it. And so those were the things that I actually went back into the book that I didn't read the first time, but I actually went back into the book and read those sections just to make sure that I really understood it when it came to the test. And not just understood the definitions of things, but understood the applications of it. So, for example, some of the concepts that I really focus in on are ownership and agency, because the actual exam had a lot less math than I was expecting. I'm great at math, so I walked into that test like, I hope there's a ton of math questions because I know I'll get them right. And that would make me feel better. But it's not just the concept of what's the difference with ownership between ownership in severalty versus joint tenants versus tenants in common. It's how does that work if a joint owner passes away? What happens to the ownership of that property? So really focus on understanding the situational aspect of the concepts, because there's a lot of questions like that on the exam. And the good news is there's a lot of practice questions like that in the Real Estate Express course. So I felt really prepared for it. So the two biggest mistakes I made when studying for the exam was, like I said, going slow, taking way too long. It shouldn't take you 6 months like it took me. If it does, it's not the end of the world, but here's what it cost me. And this would be number 2. So going slow is the number 1 mistake, which leads to number 2, which is I lost money. And you're like, Hallie, how could you have lost money while you're studying for the exam? Well, here's how. In the community that I live in, everyone is very friendly. A lot of people are out walking. So I know a lot of our neighbors. And some of the newer neighbors to the community that I actually met at a Halloween party that a fellow neighbor had, I knew that they happened to be renting. And they're not long-term renters. They had sold their house in another part of the state and moved to a new area, and were looking around for the house that they were going to buy. and they asked me when I would be licensed. Well, if you're following my timeline, I started my class December of 2019. They asked me this maybe around February, March. We'll go with it. They asked me this around February, and I'm thinking, oh great, I'll have my stuff done. Well, COVID hit, testing centers were shut down, which made me mentally go even slower in the course, because I was like, well, even if I finish the class, I can't go sit for the exam. And that was a complete wrong mindset to have. They ended up buying a house in May. I didn't finish the course until June, and that's just one commission. Another neighbor I know bought and sold their home in the same community, and a handful of other friends during that time also bought or sold during the time that I was studying. Nothing I could do about it. So at the time when I'm taking my sweet ass time studying, I didn't know when they were going to buy. And they asked me multiple times, the first neighbors that I mentioned, well, when are you going to be licensed? Like it would have been basically in my pocket. And because I dragged my feet and went slow, I lost that commission. And we're talking close to $10,000. So don't make the mistake that I did. It's not worth it. It hurts. It's like a dagger to my heart right now. And I know that future earnings will make up for it, and hopefully if they ever sell, I can list their house for them. But it sucked. In an upcoming video, I'm going to talk about what to do while you're studying so that you don't lose money like I did. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe. Keep an eye out. So if you're rocking along with me, picking up what I'm putting down, I wouldn't focus too hard on the study tactics you use, meaning flashcards versus practice exams versus writing everything out. I would focus on scheduling the time that you study, putting it in your calendar, and then creating a document with things I need to brush up on, things I need to study up on. And that would be the main focuses that I would do if I was studying for this test all over again. So I finally completed the course. Real Estate Express sent the information over to the state, and I was able to get scheduled. That took a little bit of time, but like I said, different story for a different day. And now it's the day of the test. My state does all of the testing through PSI. There's probably a few dozen states that use PSI, so it's a high likelihood that your state uses it as well. I scheduled online. Well, there was a glitch and I had to call, but I got my exam scheduled. It was at 6 p.m. and when I told my husband what time, he was like, that seems really late. So keep an eye out, because there weren't a lot of earlier time slots for when I could schedule. I did see some time slots that were like 8 a.m., 1, and then I think 6 were the time slots that were available. Personally, for me, 6 o'clock worked great. I'm a night owl. I'm not a morning person whatsoever. And it gave me a lot of time that day to review things without feeling rushed. I got to get a great night's sleep. I slept in that day, not too late, like 7. And I normally wake up at 5:30, or at least that's when my alarm is set to. Normally out of bed by 6. So 7, maybe 8 o'clock. I can't remember exactly, but I do remember because Jarrett got up at the time we're supposed to get up, and I sent him a message when I was in bed, and I said, I'm gonna get a few extra Z's because a rested mind tests better. So I got to sleep in, I got to eat well during that day, I got to study, I didn't feel rushed. Even 1 o'clock might seem like a great time, and you know you best, but if you sleep in till 8 and then you wake up and you study and you have to get ready, by the time you have to drive over there and be prepared, you're not going to have that much time in the morning to study, maybe 2 or 3 hours. And I personally liked having the whole day to casually study and break it up. Like the morning time, I'm going to take some extra practice exams. Whatever I don't get right on those practice exams, I'm going to read up on them in the book. I'm going to go back and review them. And then a couple of terms and concepts I actually just Googled and watched a video on. So you can do that too. So the 6 p.m. time slot worked really well for me. My lovely, supportive, dear husband drove me to the exam. He waited outside for me. So sweet, right? Very lucky to have a very supportive spouse. And in the 2 weeks prior to leading up to the exam, when I talked to my mom and sister on the phone, I told them, I'm a little bit nervous about taking the exam because I have to pay for it. It's coming out of my pocket. I don't want to fail it. But based on the practice exams, I was getting anywhere from the high 70s, which was a low score for me, anywhere from like 84% to low 90s on the practice exams, and on all the quizzes and the unit reviews, all that stuff. I was constantly getting 80s and 90s on it. So my mentality was, well, if 70% is passing, I'd almost have to try to fail the exam, because none of the tests that I took was I getting low 70s or even less than 70% on the practice exams. So that gave me quite a bit of confidence going into it. Now, on the day of, as we're driving over there, I'm getting all these nervous butterflies, like I was going to the dentist or something, or the doctors, which normally I don't get butterflies going to those appointments, but I definitely did going into the exam. Now, when you get to the exam place, they checked 2 forms of IDs. So I used a debit card and my driver's license. You bring a calculator with you. My calculator that I thought was acceptable actually wasn't. It was a contractor's calculator. I don't have it handy. But I didn't even think about it. It had some formulas printed on the inside flap cover that was related to contractors. So that particular location happened to have extra calculators. They gave me one to borrow. And then they gave me a bag to put all my stuff. And I left my phone in the car because Jarrett was waiting outside, and I knew that you couldn't have your phone. But they gave me a bag to put all my stuff. So I had to put my cards in there that I used for my identification, the calculator I didn't use. And they zip the bag, and then they lock it at the top, and you bring it with you into the testing room. In the particular location that I did it in the state, which is Washington, it was a long, skinny room with cubicle style, so it was divided. It was a regular computer monitor. I've heard some people, the monitor is flat in the surface, so you can't see it as you're walking by, but ours was just a regular computer monitor. And when they directed you to which station you would go to, there was only like 6 stations in there, and they were full when I got in there. It was really quiet. And when you're going in and you're checking in and they're locking up your stuff, they also took my photo, and that photo was on the screen the whole time. I guess so they want to make sure that the person there is the person that's supposed to be there. And it was also on the printout. I had 3 hours to take the exam. It was 130 questions, and then I think there were 5 additional questions on there, so I don't know if those were just like gimme questions where you could get them wrong you could get 5 questions wrong without any penalty. But it says it's 130 questions, but it was actually 135. Go figure. That's not going to make me any money to know the difference, so that's not what I focused on. It took me a little more than an hour and a half to get through everything, and I rechecked all of my questions, so you have plenty of time. You also don't have to go in order, so you can skip the questions that you don't know and go back. So I had calculated how many I could get wrong in order to still pass. Personally, the way that I did it was I went through every question and I gave my best guess, but I bookmarked the questions that I wasn't sure about, and I came back and reviewed those as well before I submitted. And it made me feel better to know that at the end, all the questions that I had bookmarked, I could get all of those wrong, which is statistically unlikely, because out of 4, I was bound to get some of them right. So I could get all the questions that I had bookmarked that I wasn't sure about wrong and still pass. And that's when I hit submit, and I felt okay. I walked out of the room. They unlocked the bag with my personal stuff in it. I gave them back the calculator, signed out, and she printed out from her computer a sheet of paper. I folded the paper. I didn't want to look at it just yet. And I walked outside and I handed it to my husband. He opened it, and he's a big jokester, so he was like, "Baby, I'm so sorry, you failed," trying to pull a prank on me. And I didn't believe him because I felt really good about it. But when you're just unsure and you haven't seen the results yourself, there's like a little tinge in me that was like, oh, maybe I didn't pass. But then he showed me the paper. I passed, and I made it out to be a lot bigger of a deal than it needed to be. So if it seems like this big, scary, hairy monster in your head, I would definitely relax, chill out, and just focus on going through it as fast as you can. Take the steps that I've given you today, and hopefully it helps. If you are studying for your real estate exam, comment down below. Let me know that you're in the process of studying. If you're thinking about getting into real estate and you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. Or if you just passed, let me know. I want to be able to celebrate you and congratulate you on your first step in your real estate career. So with that being said, this is Halberd signing out.